That's why I've seen a lot of small businesses have adopted Bitcoin because only one or a few key deciders. And then when you go to using El Salvador as an example, or Kingdom of Bhutan, or Switzerland.
This is a big change in the world market. The value of cryptocurrencies went up by 3.17% in the last day to almost $2.14 trillion. Notably, stablecoins still play a big part. They are responsible for $60 billion in transactions, which is 92.43% of all cryptocurrency trading that happens in a 24-hour period. The amount of money being traded in cryptocurrencies went up by an amazing 47% in the last day, hitting $29.4 billion. This made the market value of cryptocurrencies $1.2 trillion. Bitcoin is still the market leader, with 56.3% of the market. This increase in trading volume shows how famous and volatile Bitcoin is becoming. Lyn Alden recently did a podcast with Ben Olden in which they talked about how the use of Bitcoin is growing not only among people but also within whole communities. She talked about how important it is to connect financial tools to communication networks and how Bitcoin is becoming more useful on a bigger scale. Alden doesn't think that a strategic reserve for Bitcoin will be set up anytime soon, but she is open to the idea because she thinks it could make the Bitcoin environment even better and help it become more widely accepted. She also said that people who make decisions in smaller businesses or countries where they can move quickly are more likely to be interested in Bitcoin. As adoption grows, this could cause big price jumps.
I think one of the most bullish things from the conference was, even though a lot of the headline speakers were Republican, there was also a Democratic presence there as well. And then during the conference, over a dozen Congress people in the Democratic Party wrote a letter to the DNC saying our party has to be better on this topic. Like we have to embrace this industry better than we have, because clearly they don't want to cede that to the other side. And I think that was not as big as, say, the headline speakers, but I think that's actually the fact that both sides are now kind of at least partially engaged. I think is super hopeful, because if you have a majority of one and you have a minority of another, it makes it easier to block really draconian things that could happen, or basically there's a pretty strong foothold there to let people keep building. I think I mean, if you go to like a gold conference, it'll lean right as well. I mean, kind of appreciation of hard money is, it just for whatever reason, tends to be more on the right, maybe because, if especially that small government type conservative, the idea that you have money that's not issued by a state is attractive to them. Whereas that's generally less kind of foundational, and for a lot of parts of the left. There are obviously some parts of the left that like that. I also think the environmental FUD over years probably played a role there. At least in the United States, the Democratic Party cares more about that topic, and so the fact that for many people they view it as like energy guzzling, inefficient. They've clung on to that narrative, and then people, when they say something publicly, it's hard to then pivot from it. If they had previously believed all that research was real and was like, oh look, it's really bad, spoiling the oceans, it's hard to walk that back. So I think it just takes time to get a little bit more embraced. My guess is that this election cycle will probably won't see it. I don't think, for example, like Lummis has the most kind of like thorough description of how to do that. So she submitted an actual bill to do it rather than just kind of talk about doing it. Um, it seems probably like that passing is not super likely, but I think it's useful. One of the things I said on another podcast recently was that the fact that politicians are sitting there discussing a strategic reserve for Bitcoin is great, because it means they're not doing other things about Bitcoin. They're not figuring out how to block it or how to go after Bitcoiners. Unfortunately, there still is privacy issues that some of their, not the politicians themselves, but just deeper in, their Department of Justice and stuff goes after people just for kind of seeking privacy. But on the political level, at least, the fact that they're all talking about that is great, because it just gives more time for the ecosystem to keep building. So I don't really care too much if they end up doing a strategic reserve in the next few years. I would lean toward probably not that likely. But I'm glad that that's what they're focusing on. To that point, one thing we've kind of seen is that whether it's companies or countries, when there's a kind of a small number of decision makers that can just do something, Like because like in a normal publicly traded company, even the CEO is not like they don't own a big share of the company. They're mostly caring about their their stock options and things like that. Whereas like in say MicroStrategy's case, is the actual founder was still the CEO, and obviously owns a big percentage of the company, so can think 10 years ahead and can put significant changes in. That's why I've seen a lot of small businesses have adopted Bitcoin because only one or a few key deciders. And then when you go to using El Salvador as an example, or Kingdom of Bhutan or Switzerland, some of these smaller countries, whether they're impoverished or whether they're wealthy, the fact that they're just not super big, um, they kind of have a easier time getting through red tape and actually making a decision on something, and that seems to be a pattern that is playing out so far, which makes sense.
Alden talked about how Bitcoin is becoming more popular in groups like aid organizations and how useful it is for communities to have businesses like Nostr that combine money and conversation. She also talked about how it might help when things are hard. Alden's mention of Bitcoin Beach's success, which got a whole country to accept Bitcoin, showed how effective community-driven acceptance can be. Instead of trying to get approval or getting caught up in the chaos, Alden said, the real goal should be to grow and teach. Alden says that the broad creation of dense hubs that make it easier to spend and convert Bitcoin has helped the cryptocurrency grow from being accepted by a few people to being used by many. She thinks this is a big turning point for how Bitcoin is used and how widely it is adopted. Let's listen to the talk again and watch other clips to find out more from Lyn Alden.
So I'm bullish because of the launch of Fedi, the kind of the main launch. It's been in beta mode for a while. EgoDeath is an investor in it, but just literally as a, like I use it too. Like I'm excited for it because going back to my prior point around all these different communities, it really helps when they have tools that they can custody things locally instead of say put all their coins in like a big global exchange like Binance or something. You want obviously like wherever possible, you want those coins local, and the fact that they have built-in privacy, I think, is a really big deal. The fact that they can add other things to it, like data storage or compute, kind of like a whole super app is how they put it, and basically I think it's really useful for scaling. And one of the things that also showed me early on, and Nostr reinforced it, is the importance of having communication with your wallet kind of like built in is super helpful. Because as you one way of putting it is that all commerce is basically you're exchanging information and you're exchanging money. And so having both of those in the same app is really useful. So, for example, Fedi has internal chats that you can do, and you can attach money to your chats or request money in the chats, and then seeing the same action play out on Nostr, which is that you can communicate and send money from within the same app in many cases, is super useful. I think that um, basically with both of those technology stacks, the ecosystems come a long way compared to even say 3 years ago, when Lightning was kind of reaching levels of liquidity that were making it really workable. Um, the fact that now it's so intertwined with communication, I think is really helpful. And one of the things I found interesting is that on Nostr, for example, amid all that communication, I think of Sats in unit of account. So normally we focus on it as it's either store of value or medium of exchange. Unit of account's kind of the later thing, because it's still volatile, so most people don't think heavily in terms of unit of account. But on Nostr, it's like you get a thousand Sats on your like post or something, or you're giving out Sats. I always just think of that number. I don't like my mind doesn't even try to convert it to USD. It's just like that's the tipping environment on Nostr, and I think of it purely in Bitcoin terms. Um, and so that kind of set of things is what I find really bullish. The fact that tools are coming out that empower these communities and that tie money and communication together in a really good way.
On Tuesday, Bitcoin rose almost 4% to $60,800 and Ethereum 1.7% to $2,664. The July Federal Reserve meeting minutes and Fed head Jerome Powell's Jackson Hole Symposium speech could shed light on the U.S. rate outlook and affect the cryptocurrency market. Investors are eagerly expecting them. Expectations that the Fed may hint at a rate cut later this week drove this jump. BNB and other important coins. The CoinDCX research team has identified 156,000 as critical Bitcoin support levels, predicting future rises. Solana, XRP, Dogecoin, Tron, and Avalanche also rose 2.7% to 7% following the crypto market's rise. Upward market volatility resistance is expected at $63,500, $65,500, and $67,000. The group also observed that Powell's August 23 Jackson Hole Symposium talk may cause market moves. Coin adoption's political and ideological aspects have been illuminated by Lyn Alden. Bitcoin conferences tend right-wing due to the admiration for hard money and low government involvement, she said. Expectations that Fed policymakers may ease interest rates in September have weakened the dollar, sending the dollar index to its lowest level since early January. Allen also noted how Bitcoin's environmental difficulties have affected its image, particularly among U.S. Democrats. Interestingly, she highlighted that politicians talking about a Bitcoin strategic reserve are not aiming to stop its adoption. Bitcoin's future may depend on its acceptance and new financial tools.